I wanted to jump to AV production because that's one of the things that we talked about in our initial discussion and how we were, doing our thing and throwing all the terms and all the fun things around with AV. You've been doing this a long time, so it's not like if you saw a soundboard or monitors, you're like, what is this? You know what to do. And I wanted to discuss, the role of AV production and how that's played out in creating these intentional events. Because with AV production, you have sound, you have lighting, you have all these things, you have fog machines, you have disco ball. I mean, all the things. LED wall. That's right, pyro. And I wanted to see, the role of AV and how this is, played out through these intentional events that you've been talking to us about.
Yeah, absolutely. So also a big question. Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, AV is the core of the production value, right? It's a big ticket item. And so it becomes the amplifying lens through which the message gets put through, more than just, an audio reference, right? Like it is truly the conduit through which the real meat of a conference or a session gets put through. So it not only does it have to work, but it has to be in service of those messages, right? So, if you have like our Smile Train event, which is a community event, you don't want to have necessarily a giant LED wall with its bright lights, its crisp edges, it's high tech.
Yeah.
Not that if you have it, you couldn't work with it. Of course you could, but if you have the choice, you may want something a little softer, more projection, more something that's a little bit more tactile, a little bit more analog, right? So I think that those kind of choices are important. But also making sure that the production value is really, truly there so that you have lighting that is actually good and functioning, that you can have different looks, that you can help move the narrative along with your technology. So you have content and in screens and the ability to have rests in between sessions, both for the eyes and for your ears. But you can bring the lights down for a video. You can use walk-on music or walk-off music that's appropriate in levels that you can hear people and they sound warm and rich and not tinny and, God forbid, any screeches. That the room is lit in a way that you can see comfortably, but it's not a cafeteria or a hospital room, right? That all of these things speak to and move people to, again, going back to that tribalized idea, creating that space, to get a little woo-woo, for people to really begin to relax and be able to take in information and also be able to start building some of those lasting connections. And then moving beyond just sort of the basic setups, everything depending on the conference and depending on the goals, bringing in things like touchscreens and apps and gamification and layering in all of those other pieces of engagement to sort of give the conference almost a third dimension, right? So that especially if you're doing hybrid or you have an online audience of any kind, then an app does become important because that's how you tie the two rooms together, right? Or the two audiences together, but make it a much more of a 360 experience for everybody. Obviously polling and Q&As and things like that, right? Like those are long-standing go-tos. And having, proper audio for that. So if somebody does have a question or if you do set up an open mic, again, that you can hear them, that their voice is warm and that they're, get the mic to them quickly so that they don't do half their question in the dark and half their question in clear audio. these are the things that make me crazy when I'm, in the room and other people are like, oh, it's fine. And I'm like, no, oh. Yes, it is fine, but it's not okay. Like, come on, like, let's go, let's be on it. All of that said, there are also different ways of getting to those goals. So it doesn't have to be a $200,000 AV bill, right? Like, there are things you can do to help, keep it within a budget. But yeah, I think that technology and AV, they're such important tools to your audience being able to receive those messages and those strategic goals that it has to be a real conversation. And so many event people, planners in particular, are so intimidated by AV. They see that equipment list and the people behind the curtain. And, I was a IATSE 600 camera assistant before I left the film business. And before that, I did a lot of lighting design. So I've always been on the technical side. I've always been behind this, the curtain or behind the camera. So I feel very comfortable in those environments. I feel very comfortable with those teams. And while the equipment is ever evolving, so I would never consider myself an actual AV person. Like, I couldn't go run an AV company, but I know how to pick really great partners and creative partners too, which is really important. But yeah, it's like we're talking about doing, I just put in a bid for a large project during General Session Week at the UN, and they want to have all this technology. And like, I've just discovered mobile LED screens that are like mobile LED signage that are super thin, and they're about 8 feet tall. And I'm so excited because it's like a high-tech conference and all the things we can do. Let's do it. And the great thing about things like that is then there's no garbage, right? Like, it's greener, even though you're using electricity. I know, but I see the chats going. But yeah, it's new technology is always very exciting to me. Virtual was very exciting to me at the very beginning of the pandemic. We had already been doing hybrid, so it was an easy lean in. And I still think it's just an incredible tool and powerful tool, especially for global teams when done right. And it's not just, hours and hours of movie, because we are not TV producers. We're event producers.
You're right.
Right. And vFairs is a part of that.
Yeah, sure are. Yeah. I love the concept of, staying in touch and up to date with things that are happening. Because in technology, especially in event tech, it changes every day, and that's across, us, vFairs, and all the other players out there. And, AV, a lot of the things change there too. It's a little slower moving, but still the technology there with, audio, with visuals, it just amazes me. Lighting, the LED screens, that I love this. You have to use those. I mean, it makes sense with the 8-foot, LED, mobile wall that you just talked about. It makes sense for that specific event, but it may not make sense for your other event, where you talked about, you kind of came down a little bit on production to focus more because it just made sense for that environment, of people. They didn't need high tech. So you kind of use that mid to lower, tech to, check off the goals still. And it just works for the audience. So